Welcome to the Say Network podcast. I'm Megan, and I'm here with Jim Sparks.
Hello.
And our producer, Abraham Kavara.
Hello.
And we have a really great episode for you guys today. We're sitting down with our program secretary, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Smith. Lisa,
Hello,
welcome.
everyone.
And we want to do an episode. Basically, we have a ton of programs in the Salvation Army that have been honestly life-changing for teens and for young adults. We've got divisional youth retreats, we have young adult retreats, summer camp staff opportunities, we have Service Corps, we have RevHi, we have all these different programs. But one thing that I've noticed is that after doing some of these programs, a lot of participants, they'll experience a pretty significant change in their life. God works in their life, and some people are completely different when they come back for the better. And I think the challenge for a lot of people when they do these type of opportunities is what do they do when they come back home to reality, right? They've had this great summer experience or this great, year-long experience if they've done RevHi. How do they kind of get back to reality? And so we wanted to dedicate an episode to looking at the impact of these experiences and how we can make the most of them afterwards. So before we get into the episode, we want to take a minute and talk about a youth culture resource. So Abraham, what do you have for us?
This is a youth culture resource again, but this is a little bit of...
Can we just say that Abraham will never do a youth culture?
Never.
Okay.
I will teach you how to, I won't teach you anything. I will advise you on how to, on current issues that you need to be aware of.
For the very few people that listen to this, are like, he never actually does youth culture.
I never got a resource from him.
This is teaching you to be resourceful as a pastor or as a minister. But I was looking at the news, and I like to look at the news. But Match.com is being sued for tricking their users.
I saw this.
You saw this? Okay.
A friend of mine's pretty angry about it.
This is crazy. Essentially, they catfished everybody.
Yeah.
They catfished their customers, essentially.
Allegedly.
Okay, this is FTC still investigating.
What's catfish?
So catfish is when somebody posts a picture of themselves that isn't really who they are. So, like I post a picture of Fabio or something.
Right.
If anybody does.
Smos?
Or The Rock. Yes, Smos. And I say that's me, and then so that's essentially what they did. What they did was that they, the claim is saying that they falsely advertised connections that people had made that were all fake, and so right now they're currently being sued by the Federal Trade Commission. But the reason I bring that up is because I want to know, how did you guys meet your spouse? We're all married here. How did you guys meet your spouses? Lisa, how did you meet your spouse?
Well, actually, it fits in with what we're talking about today, because I actually was in Africa, in Rwanda, and Kyle and I ended up on the same relief team.
Yeah.
After the war in Rwanda, the genocide there. So
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we met there.
Oh wow, yeah. Awesome. Jim, how did you meet your
in the crib.
Oh really?
Pardon?
Like MTV cribs?
No, in a legitimate crib.
In a pack and play
crib.
Yeah, that's where we first shared a pacifier.
Oh,
and,
gross.
Yeah. Hey, no one educated us. We didn't have any of those talks yet. But
you guys had
our parents were friends.
On pacifier safety.
Yeah, our parents were friends, and they they play cards and stuff together, and that's it. We've known each other our entire life. I don't know if it's arranged, but we're almost 18 years, so I'm not judging. It worked out for me.
Yeah.
I think I won in a deal at least.
Awesome. Megan, how'd you meet your spouse?
on Service Corps.
Yeah.
But I always clarify, we met on Service Corps. We were on different teams, and
you better clarify.
We didn't actually start dating until 2 years later. So.
All right.
Not actually on Service Corps, because when I talk to Service Corps teams, I always tell them no new relationships while you're on Service Corps.
That's a good incentive to go on Service Corps.
And while you're clarifying, I want to clarify too that Kyle and I did not get together in Rwanda. It was after we met in Rwanda.
I think time has passed enough for you guys to be able
to be honest. Just tell us.
I'm being very honest.
You're not getting in trouble at this point. Yeah. We may have locked eyes on that trip and said a few whispered sweet nothings each other's way.
We played cards. That's as far as it went.
Paco was not on my radar at that point.
I kind of actually believe that one. Poor Paco.
You gotta get on that radar somehow. You gotta do something.
Well, I'm saying poor Paco because Paco probably the whole time's going,
Yeah.
How come she doesn't notice me?
Dove eyes.
Just every time she walks in the room, I stop, and she's like, I don't know who that guy is. That's probably the case. We should bring William Nelson back in to interview Paco because
that was awesome, man.
he destroyed Paco in an interview.
Yeah.
Where's the ring?
Yeah.
Why aren't you asking to marry him?
Called out, man. That was good. Well, it worked. It motivated him.
It did.
It did. It was good.
How long after that did he engage? You guys get engaged?
That's a good question. When was boot camp?
Gosh, 2000. That would have been, I don't know, 12.
We didn't get married till 2015.
It might have been after that. Could have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're going to credit William Nelson on the final push for Paco.
Sure. Yeah, I met my wife at her core, and over time, it took a while from where we met to where we actually started dating. But the reason I bring this up is because I was reading a statistic that says 40% of 40% of Americans use online dating.
That's 40%. A lot higher than I would have thought.
That's a lot higher. This comes from a dating website, so I don't know if they're...
No, I think that's very accurate.
That's very accurate. So...
a friend told me.
What's interesting, though, is like one of these days, like it's a generation it's definitely a generation thing because I think we are probably the last of that generation. Millennials, maybe older millennials are probably also the last of that generation that wouldn't consider that as much. But now I do think that it's definitely an idea that it is prevalent in people's minds. And as youth leaders, I think we should start training on how do we pastor people who are going through those kinds of relationships? Because back in the day, you could easily sit two people down, but now you're like, who are you talking to? Oh, she's like, in Cincinnati or something,
But that's normal.
It's normal now, yeah. So you as a pastor, as a minister, you have to, maybe think about that a little bit more. And I think even core officers, just people need to be. This needs to be on your radar a little bit and look out for them for things like this, issues that may arise with different, websites or things or whatever they're going through, and educate yourself in some way to learn how to help them navigate through this whole, online dating thing. Because I think that number is just going to keep going higher and higher because it's convenient. It's like people like ordering food now on their phones, and they're also ordering a spouse on their phone. So
I don't think you order,
but it's just the convenience of the way life is, and I think this is something we should definitely be aware of. And
what's on the menu, right?
Yeah. What's on the menu? Swipe, swipe, swipe.
Swipe.
Yeah.
So all that to say is sayharmony.com.
Say Harmony.
Is that in the works?
That should have got off the ground.
Fulton and I joked about it a lot. And then all of a sudden it kind of got real. And then, I don't know. I guess it's possible.
Yeah. Just help people connect them with.
I think it would actually do really well.
I think there's hope.
I feel like there's informal versions
of
that.
Yeah, there's Facebook groups.
I agree.
Of
it's happening online because you can easily meet someone in another division on the other side of the world now with social media.
Yeah, but we could do our own, you could swipe based off core leadership roles that you're looking for. You might be looking for a YPSM. That's going to happen.
I'm looking for a YPSM.
I'm looking for a tithing sergeant. That's really more
You could filter based on ranking.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Majors and up.
Yep.
Core sergeant major.
Well, you're a single colonel. You're like, man, I can't go for a captain. I'm going to need at least a major. So.
Or maybe you do want a captain.
Or maybe, I don't know. So all those possibilities. But that's going to be an interesting thing to follow on Match.com if they were actually indeed catfishing people.
Yeah, because they make a guarantee, right? Like you'll have at least one connection in a certain amount of time. I feel like I've seen advertisements like that.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah.
That's really easy. There's a lot of desperate people.
Well, it's crazy though because I remember when I first heard of online dating. Like I know people who did that, and they were like really?
It's a stigma at the beginning, but now it's super normal. Yeah.
Now it's just completely normal.
Everyone does it.
And it's a part of life. And it's also should be a part of our ministry. It should be a part of our one of those areas that we're concerned about.
Yeah, how to navigate that
Yeah.
in a way that's honoring to Christ and
Absolutely.
And,
Anyways,
honest.
yeah, for sure.
Let's get straight to it, Lisa. Would we?
I'm here.
All right. It's a weird segue from Match.com to matching people to ministry around the world.
Nice.
Boom.
There it is.
Well
Here
done.
it is. Lisa, you have had the opportunity to do a lot of different mission trips with the Salvation Army, where both as an officer and non-officer, right? What has been your approach like? Has it changed since when you first started doing those type of opportunities? Because I'll say opportunities because it wasn't just mission trips. You did other things as well.
Yeah.
How does your approach change as you've gotten more experience in doing those things?
Yeah, I was thinking about kind of my life experience around overseas mission trips. I started kind of on my own. When I graduated high school, I sent myself, Salvation Army didn't send me, I sent myself to Sunbury Court in the UK, and I worked a summer there, and had an experience of, just being in the Salvation Army there, serving at their conference center there. That's the place where they elect the general. They have a lot of big Salvation Army conferences, there in the London area. I did that at age 17. That's kind of where it started.
Did you ever go into the tunnel at Sunbury Court?
There is a tunnel there that Henry VIII used to keep his mistresses in Sunbury Court.
Did you go?
No, I didn't. Actually, I don't. Is it still open? Because I heard about the tunnel, but because it's right across from the Thames River, right?
Yeah.
So and the tunnel goes under the road into the bowels of Sunbury Court.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of the tunnel?
So the king could went and visited his
Oh, I see,
mistresses
I see.
because Windsor Castle is very close.
Wait, which king was this?
King Henry VIII, I think, but I could be wrong. That
Henry-
was
Yeah.
just a.
The architect who designed it, he because it wasn't original. The tunnel wasn't original to Sunbury Court, and then the architect who did it was known for creating tunnels in all of his areas,
Right.
and so then
It was just a
It
quick
got some
way
practical
to get
use.
to the river, so that you could just jump on a boat and go. But I might be wrong with which king it was, but that was kind of what they were talking about back in 1982, right?
Wow.
So anyway, that's kind of where it started, and I got to see the the Salvation Army in the motherland where it started, and was really involved there. And then my first service corps experience was to Mexico right after the earthquake, actually, like within a year of the earthquake that happened in the 80s. So 1986, the summer of 86. I remember it so well because I just got my degree in French.
of course.
And then I went to Mexico and spoke Spanish for the whole summer. So I kept going, like it was silly. But, and to answer your question, I'll stop there because those were my two first kind of overseas experiences. Those experiences, I think, were really foundational for making my faith my own, where all of a sudden here I've grown up as an officer's kid, I've been in a Christian, family and part of the core life, and my parents' faith was successfully passed on to me early. But then when you start going outside of that bubble that you have, that's where it's like, well, is this really, do I really believe this? Is this my faith or is it just mom and dad's faith? And really, going to Mexico opened my eyes to the reality of Jesus in a different culture and how he could bring joy when there's people that are so, in poverty. They weren't, they had enough to eat, but they were just living without much. And to see the joy and the generosity that they showed to us, this was helping me see, it's not just my family, script. It's really, he's real here to people who don't have much and who find joy in him. And the other thing is that it trained me for some things that I said I believed in, like you should witness about your faith. I remember when I was, I think it was at Urbana, they said something like this. They said, you know what? Don't think just because you go overseas, you're going to be a great evangelist. If you're not evangelizing here in your own context where you live, what makes you think you're all of a sudden going to evangelize when you get overseas? Location doesn't make a difference. You are who you are. You do what you do, right? And I kind of agree with that, and I understand the truth of that. But at the same time, when you go on a service corps, your life is arranged around evangelism and service, right? So that actually trains you to be intentional, in a way you maybe haven't been before,
Might give you some freedom.
Yeah.
Like, because you're like, oh, this is kind of what we're supposed to do.
Right. This is what I say I've always believed in, but maybe I haven't done it as much back home. But now, like in the morning in Mexico, we built a core. The core is still standing.
Oh, wow.
We moved bricks and we helped like construction workers. We moved ladrillos. They were after the earthquake. They had a brick making machine there in Mexico, and they were helping rebuild Mexico City, right? And that was the Salvation Army's brick making factory in Mexico, and we took some of those bricks and we moved them so that the construction workers could build this course. So in the morning we did that. Then we went and had the Home League made us lunch, and it was delicious. And then in the afternoon we would go out and evangelize, mostly hora de gozo with kids, and we'd go up into some really impoverished areas where they don't even have running water. They were like in mud huts. It was like it felt like Africa. It was just very impoverished. But that was strategic and intentional. And I gained skills in how to talk to people about Jesus, how to witness in Spanish. I gained Spanish skills after my French. So that was it was foundational for my faith. Now you said, how is it different than the later stuff? So the probably the most impactful and the later trip that I took was the one to Rwanda that I mentioned already. That's a different scenario because I'm not going over to evangelize and build a core. I'm actually going into a country where the whole nation is suffering from PTSD and 1 million people have been hacked to death or killed horribly, and children are orphans, and they're still fighting. So I'm walking into a war zone. So that one, the early stuff was foundational to my early faith. That one was like, okay, Jesus was real in Mexico for the people who didn't have much. Now, is Jesus real for people who have been traumatized by genocide and violence? And I mean, it was just horrific. And walking into that, I had fears I had to deal with. I was scared. On the Time magazine cover, when they asked me to go, the Time magazine said, "There are no devils left in hell. They're all in Rwanda."
Wow.
And bodies were floating down rivers. I mean, that was a different scenario.
Wow.
But and some of the same as Mexico, but more deeply, because here I'm going, is Jesus going to be real to this woman who's lost her whole family? Everybody had lost people, and I saw that, yes, he was real. I'll give you one story. Diana, she kind of came and helped our team. We had a team of officers that were from all different countries, from Switzerland, from Uganda, from Britain, from America. We all went in. We had special things that we were doing, and we were going to help orphan children. And Diana was hired, a Rwandan lady who had escaped to Uganda and came back, and we hired her to help us with some administrative things. She had witnessed her new husband of probably a couple years killed in front of her face, and then his body was thrown down a toilet pit. And she was pregnant with their first child. She escaped to Uganda, had the baby in Uganda, came back after things had kind of settled down, and was working for us. And she showed me her photo album, and we went page by page through her high school photo album. She goes, "Oh, she's dead. He's dead. They're dead."
Wow.
Every page.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah,
Wow.
every page. And I just sat there and I was weeping listening to her. I didn't say anything. I was just like, oh my goodness, like this. I was thinking of my photo albums and how that would be for me, and she wasn't weeping because again, PTSD, like everybody was just like expressions of grief were redundant. Yeah, everyone's lost a lot, right? But at the end, when I left, she wrote me a note and she said, the Bible says God carries our burdens. And she said, but really you and the team, you've carried my burden with me. And so, I mean, those kind of things, they just kind of, you realize, even in the darkest places, Jesus is real. And so, I mean, that just affected my faith and my outlook considerably. So that was a long answer to a short question.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I know, for me, I mean, I went on Service Corps And I worked at camp for several summers, and those summers had a really big impact on my life. They taught me a lot about my own faith, helped me solidify my faith, my spiritual formation. I feel like I learned how to love other people, to care for other people, and to show like the love of Christ to other people. And the love of Christ was shown to me. But after those summers, I feel like those things have impacted me well into even now, in the work that I do now. It's kind of cool. It's come full circle in that now I'm leading Service Corps, and I get to kind of go through that experience with different teams every summer. I'm curious, the mission work that you've been a part of, how has it had any type of impact on what you do now today? I mean, I'm sure a lot has happened between your summer at Sunbury Court all the way until now as a Territorial Program Secretary. How has that mission experience impacted your life today? And I'd also like to hear from Jim or Abe if you guys have something on this as well, because I know you guys have had summers at camp and Service Corps as well. But Colonel, did it impact you?
Yeah, so my job today as the program secretary, I'm kind of overseeing kind of the mission work of the program mission work of the Salvation Army. So I think my experience overseas really made me more convinced of the absolute beauty of our mission as the Salvation Army. And that's kind of to sum it up. I didn't tell you, I also went to Russia and the Ukraine. So after Mexico, I was on a team in Mexico, but for Russia and the Ukraine, I led the team. I was a summer assignment cadet to Russia right when we went back in. So the Army had been kicked out of Russia in 1923. So we went back in 1991, and then the summer of 92, I took a team in. And it's interesting going into a place where they've tried to remove God from culture, from society, from everything. And to be able to come back in with, again, Jesus is real, and he's got something to say in this darkness, and to be able not just to preach the gospel, but to meet human need. In Russia, it was so interesting. They had pushed the elderly out to the far edges of the town. There was no extreme, like the nursing homes weren't in Moscow. They pushed them out because if you weren't perfect, you had to be perfect to be in Moscow. So mental institutions for people with special needs, anything that wasn't the perfect humanity in their view was pushed outside. And we would go visit nursing homes, and they were so suspicious of us. They were like, what are you doing here? We're like, we're in our uniforms. We're from the Salvation Army. We're here to sing and to give what we have, which is Hall's cough drops, because that's what we had donated, right? We're going to give Hall's cough drops to everybody and sing and say hi to people. And they're like looking at us like we're nuts, because nobody makes that long of a drive out to the edge. Like we've got on the end of the line of the train, and this, like you went out far. It took hours to get there, and we would just go visit, places, people with special needs, and they couldn't believe we were there. It was like, who does that? And I'm like thinking, well, people who love Jesus do that. We want to show love to the people that other people forget. And
I think the Salvation Army specifically, that's our people.
Right.
We always go out to the marginalized,
and we had to go find them.
Yeah,
because it was just the shock on their face was really the thing that was striking to me. Like they thought we were spies or something. We're like, no, we're here to sing and to give presents to elderly people. So it was just like they couldn't. And I just realized, we take it for granted here in America. Like kettles work here in America, not because everyone's Christian, but because of that Judeo-Christian foundation where we're helping the poor as a value of Jesus. And that has translated even to people who don't know Jesus here. And so kettles work if people give to the Army who don't believe in Jesus, so that we can help the marginalized and people who get forgotten. And it just was such a, so I think that experience and many like that have kind of just helped me just love our mission so much more. Again, I have long answers. Sorry. Anyway, Jim, what do you think?
I think in addition to obviously the significant spiritual impact that like a camp would have, in a camp setting, I think the two additional things that I would take away is one was a sense of community of camp's a unique place. Like at school, you could easily divide and conquer, right? And or get conquered, depending on what end you're on. And camp, there is cliques, of course, but there's also this the sense of community that you're not used to. Like, I mean, when I was at my corps, there was only a couple of us my age for a couple different parts of my life. Like, we were a rough group as well, but when you went to camp, you felt safe and you felt like you were a part of a community, and you could find yourself easily getting in a van with people you don't know and going to the mall and hanging out with people you don't know, that you don't ever get that opportunity. And so I think that's a really cool place. And for a lot of people, that's pretty significant change in their life. I think the other one is a lot of this, and this includes service corps as well, and mission trips, we're being taught how to work. Like, you have to work hard on these things. Like,
Usually.
You have no choice, right? Unless you're the craft director at camp, you have to work hard.
Hey. Careful now.
No, I'll.
We love all the craft directors.
I'll stand ground. I love them, but they don't have to work hard. And but you know, excuse me. I think about like 14, 15-year-old, and you've got to get up and go to work, and you do it every day that you're there, and I think it builds in some good traits, and you find that the harder you work, the better things are, and the better the community is, and I think that's a good thing. And so I think the people who are successful in those things are the ones that work hard and figure it out, and then it translates into their everyday life. That's just how it is. And so I still love the dish room. Like, I never graduated from the dish room, and I'll do the dishes at camps. I did it this summer at Redwood Glen. I did the dishes, and I love going in there because it's a reminder to me of what it meant to work hard, because you have to get those dishes done. Like, there's a meal coming up next, and you can't just slack off and stuff. So I think it built up good life habits on top of the spiritual impact and the community aspect of it.
You know, I agree with you. I think also leadership skills too.
Yeah.
Like, I heard once that people's worst fear is public speaking, and yet at camp every night you have a campfire, and in the morning you have chapel, and I didn't realize how much that helped me later when now I'm an officer and I have to speak a lot, and I thought so much of that initial skill came from all those summers I worked at camp. So.
It had a really big impact on me because I didn't like to be up in front of people.
Right.
I didn't participate in the musicals at the corps growing up because I was smart, and no, I didn't want to be a part of it. And I can remember a particular campfire at camp that I forced myself to be uncomfortable the entire campfire and get up in front of people and stuff. And I don't know, people, I think because I've been up in front of people for a lot of years, people think that that's something I enjoy doing. I don't enjoy it at all. I much prefer to be sitting in the chairs. But I think something about camp pushed you to do that, to find an acceptable comfort level of it, to be able to do it. And I do wonder, like, if I didn't have that experience, would I be willing to get up in front of people?
I think it goes back to community that you were talking about, because camp becomes a safe place to try things that you might fail at, right? And if it's at campfire, it's like, well, I'll have a good laugh and it's okay. And so it's like a lab for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was telling, I did camp orientation training at a camp this summer, and I had overheard, like, I was sitting at the table, and a lot of times when you're sitting at a table and they don't know you, if you don't speak, then they think you can't hear. And so I was just digesting the conversation that was going around, and it's a group of young adults that are, their worries are different than what, like, several years down the line will be. And I started thinking about, I'm like, wow, this particular two people didn't have a clue of, like, what's to come, like responsibility of, like, paying rent or mortgage and all that stuff. Like, these people have been kind of coddled, if you will. And so, and then they were kind of complaining of, like, well, yeah, I'm here at camp. And it didn't seem like genuine. And I was so mad. I was like, this is a lucky experience. And you have no idea how lucky you are right now. Like, it's a weird experience to know that, like, I'm getting paid to flap my arms like a funky chicken, and everyone's laughing at you. And this is part of, like, what I do. and all my meals are given to me and all that stuff. It really is an incredible experience. And so and the next piece of the training, I highlighted all that, and I said, it gets worse. Like, enjoy this, because there's so much good that comes out of this and learning that it's going to make you a better person down the line. And if you miss it, if you're just there just to float around, you're going to miss out, and we're going to miss out. The Salvation Army will miss out ultimately, and those kids will. But
I think we have no idea how being at camp and working at camp, fosters the next generation of leaders.
Yeah,
for sure, and gives people these skills to succeed.
There's a lot of intentional leadership development in it, but there's a lot of unintentional,
we didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's like, wow, we're really doing it. I mean, even just so much as like cabin cleanup for the kids and how it's designed. And,
life skills.
Yeah, it's just rich with that kind of experience. And it's not limited to camp. I mean, you're going to get the same thing on immersive experiences like mission trips, Service Corps, and that kind of stuff. RevHi. I mean, all those type of things. Anytime you're in a small community that you have to depend on the community to thrive, you're going to learn that real quick.
Yeah, you have to work out the challenges, and you got to work through all that stuff. There's no escaping from
right.
it, you know?
And I always say that Service Corps is just a really odd social experiment, and because we put you on teams that you don't know each other. Chances are you don't know each other. It's very rare that you really have a relationship with anyone that you're going to. And then you spend 5 days together in an orientation, and then on the 6th day, you guys are sharing a bed because that's your only option. Yeah, in some country that you've just flown on an airplane for your first time, maybe. Like, there's a lot of emotions, and it always just works out, and it's a good experience, and people see different parts of their life in those experiences.
I think the revealing thing about Service Corps, when I think about it in hindsight, is when you go in with this group of people, you kind of got a clean slate. You have like a clean slate. They don't know anything about you, you know, and you learn about yourself hearing their feedback.
Oh yeah,
you learn about like how you really are, and then some things will correspond to criticisms you've heard before. But some things would be new, like they'll highlight strengths that you were like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing that I was good at. And I think that was a revealing thing for myself on Service Corps, and in the terms of like character and all that stuff. But in terms of faith, it was like really the first time that I was a Christian all by myself, right. You know, without my mom and dad, right. To like making sure I show up to church and all the stuff that I learned and all that. It all came into play. Like, how much do you know, or you know, can you preach, or do you have anything to share? Do you have anything to give? It was a really revealing experience, and I never forget it. But yeah, like it's a good testing ground in a way, of just, you know, it's like it's a good litmus test of where you are in maturity as well. So yeah.
Almost a little scary to think about the theology that you were spitting out during those early times when it's like your first time on your own. I can look back at like me doing devotions for the first time. I'm like, publicly, I go, I think I got this right. Yeah. I'm kind of confident, reasonably confident, but who knows?
Yeah, you show up it's humbling. Yeah, you show up real like, you know, feisty and like, let's do this, and then you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and then you can know everything, and then you're tested in your character. You're tested like as an act, like in your relationships, and you know, in your honesty, and all these things. Your character, is it just religion, or is it something that's really, you know, something that's like deep in your heart and real? Right. But yeah.
So we talked about some of the benefits of these experiences. I remember coming back from summer camp and Service Corps, and I felt like during the summer I had a purpose. I had a very specific purpose. I had a role, and throughout the summer I worked and got better at that, and I was, you know, making an impact for the kingdom in a visible way. And then I got home, and I just felt like I kind of struggled to find my purpose again and figure out like what is my life right now. So I'm curious, like after one of these sort of experiences, these life impacting experience that you guys have had, what are some of the challenges that you faced after you returned home from either a mission trip or camp or whatever it is, and how did you overcome those challenges?
For me, I think the biggest challenge, every personality is different, and some things will affect people, in a different way than me. So for me, the biggest challenge was how do I, now that I know, for example, that Jesus is real to me and that I am, being, his fault, that's something that it's not just my parents' value, but it's my value. How do I take what I did at Service Corps or at camp? How do I include that in my life back at home? Because I'm back at school. I'm back in my regular context where it's easy to kind of just slide and do your thing and not think intentionally about the fact that Jesus actually did say, my job as his followers to make disciples, and not just to the ends of the earth, but in Jerusalem and Judea, that's nearby home, and in Samaria to the people that everyone wants to ignore, right? So the challenge for me was how to make evangelism and that a more intentional and actually strategic part of my life where it maybe hadn't been as much before. So that was, and how did I do that? Well, part of, we were talking earlier, Jim and I were talking about when I came and talked about Rwanda at his youth councils when he was 16.
Yeah, I knew she was trying to get money from me.
I didn't ask for money. I think the youth councils people might have asked for your money, but I did not. I was telling my story. That was one thing that helped me to kind of to tell my story and tell people what God was doing in my life, because maybe you thought of it as a money pitch. Mm-hmm. But I have a friend who, which surprises me, pointed to when I went to WYI after Rwanda and talked about, or actually I was heading to Rwanda and I was talking about how I was afraid, but I was still going. And then she heard me afterwards and she said that had an impact on her life spiritually, so being bold to, share your stories and share your faith, that was one of the things that I did. And then trying to continually ask myself, who's getting saved by, because of something I said or did, who's meeting Jesus because of my life? That's a question that even today I've asked, I'm asking my next door neighbor to dinner, because it's like, who doesn't know Jesus that I interface with, and I have an opportunity to let them know. That's the challenge for me. Yep.
Yeah, I think when you're finished with an experience, particularly if it's a good experience, the first thing you miss immediately is the community, and that's really hard, particularly if you're in your own space where you don't have maybe a lot of friends or a church group that is a size that like where you guys could go and do stuff, and that's really hard. And there's loneliness that comes with that of like, oh man, and I just want to go back to camp, or I just want to go back to Africa. I just want to go back there. We don't want to go back to the location. We want to go back to the community. We want to go back to the friends, to the trust that they may have in you, to the kind of the cheerleaders around you. You want all that, and so you're missing out on that. And then Colonel Holcomb, Ida Holcomb, she told something to Service Corps at a debrief many years ago that I thought was kind of harsh as she was saying it, but it's the truth is very significant. She said, don't be offended when you go home and no one cares about what you did and doesn't want to hear your stories. Because they don't have any context. Your emotions to that, your emotional connection to that is far superior than they could ever imagine, because you lived it. And so you have to be patient with that. And I think that's really hard. It's hard to hear, but it's even harder to live, because I want to tell you all about all that stuff. And you're just sitting there going, great. It sounds like you had a great trip.
I always use that at the end of Lord of the Rings. If those of you seen this movie, Jim. It's really a really interesting scene. I love it, but it's like the movie is like a three-part trilogy, whatever. And these guys go on this adventure, and it's like amazing adventure where they have to like save the world basically, and then they come back home to their village. And the first guy they experience is their like angry neighbor, and he's always scowling at everybody that passes by, and he sees them, and they're wearing their like nice like robes, from what all the riches they've gained. And the first guy they see is that neighbor, and he's on the porch sweeping. He looks at them and he scowls, exactly the same as when they left. Like nothing changes for
Right.
the town that they came back to. And it's,
Right, and that's hard too.
After
Like
14 hours of movie, too.
Right.
you go through this radical change,
Yeah.
and then you come home and everybody's lived life exactly how it was, and it just moved on, and that's really hard to deal with. I read a interesting article on Slate.com many years ago, and it was a guy talking about how he missed working at camp desperately, and it was a non-Christian camp, and but he talked about how he felt empty consistently by not being back at camp, and it was because it was the first place in his life that he felt a value, like significant value. Like he even talked about the silly things of like the girls, the girl campers having a crush on him, and he goes, "No one's have a crush on me," and I was king of whatever the skit, and everyone called him that, and he goes, "I just felt like I was like a rock star, like a celebrity the entire summer," and I could definitely see that. Like everyone has like kind of that moment where they're just walking, they've done it. They've reached the top, and at camp, and then when you go home, it's not there. At camps, one of the big struggles that we always had was that, I want to work here full time. I want to work here full time, because they think that that's the experience. And then come October, like I don't want to be here anymore because they're missing the community. And so it's a really, really big challenge, and for some it's just too much to overcome in a lot of ways.
I felt very, you bring that up, I felt very similar to that. I remember I used to go on missions trips as a kid on those like week long ones, and then I went on service corps, which was like forever. It was a long time, and it was awesome. It was like forever, but it was great. And I remember coming back, and it was like, all right, go back to your community college and go sit in class. And I couldn't do it, man. I could not do it. It just, my mind was not there anymore. And I remember that's what sort of led me to wanting to work in news and working as a photojournalist, and running around with a camera up mountains and all this crazy stuff, because like I couldn't sit still anymore, and it kind of ruined that a little bit for me. And but in a good way. Like that was one reason I went to Louisiana to live in Louisiana for like a year and a half. Because I wasn't afraid to do stuff like that anymore. I wasn't afraid to just, try that out. And there was something new out there. And also I've always, like, it kind of built something in me that, a little bit of confidence, I guess, in terms of like being able to like try something that you've never tried before, and trying new things and not being afraid to try new things. But it does ruin you a little bit. And I think, I don't know, looking back, I don't know if it was good or bad. There were some things that I regret. Like I wish I'd finished college, but I also don't regret any of the great, awesome things I got to do, and the places I got to go. And so I don't know what I should be encouraging people right now who are listening to this.
I think you hit on that, actually. Like you went and you were able to pick out the things from that experience that really like you felt passionate about, and you gave you purpose, and you were able to find ways to do that outside of that trip. And I always say, I think for me that was a key too, figuring out what it was about the summer or that experience that I really loved, and then trying to find ways to do that at my core or at school or whatever, outside of that experience.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to know that you're not alone. Yeah. Like that's normal feelings.
Right.
That weird, like longing to kind of go back to that is normal feelings. And I think the way to deal with that is to try to create that around you, and try to create that experience around you. Because I think what we forget is, part of what made that great was the ministry experience. And so many people come off these things and don't ever get involved in the ministry. Yeah. And that's what created all of this. Right. And so the idea, like, I remember the one summer that I came back, I was like, I'd like to teach Sunday school at the core. And I was teaching Sunday school. It was 12 girls, like 5th, 6th graders, and no boys. But because I was doing that, I felt like it was just an extension of the summer. And it made that transition so much easier, because I'm still doing the ministry. I'm still doing this kind of stuff. It's just in a different context. And so I think the worst thing that you could do off a trip like this is to just ghost everything.
Yeah, like isolate.
Yeah,
and cut yourself off.
And it should be, these should always be springboards to another opportunity of mission.
Yeah.
And I just hesitate to, because sometimes people get mission-aholic. You know, they like, I got to go on another trip. I got to go on another trip. There's nothing wrong with going on multiple trips. But if you're just going on it because you're trying to recreate an experience that you had before by going on these things.
They like the adrenaline.
Right. Then that's not it. And what did John Berglund call it? Was social tourism? Mission tourism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking before about how, you know, at camp you have this, no one, you know, people have crushes on you and you're the king of the mountain or whatever it is. But even when you're in another country too, you're the, wow, that's the American group.
Right.
And you get a lot of attention, and people who are kind of nobody's back here kind of are the heroes there. And so, and that's, you know, that's just feeding kind of our ego too. I mean, we gotta realize that yeah, you can't live there. You got to understand that for what that is. But yeah, I agree. Bringing it home and taking what you learned there and how you saw God work there, and saying, how could we see God work here, and what is my part in that?
I think one thing I remember Service Corps focuses in on too, like when it talks to like corps, like we're taking them for like a month or a month and a half, and we're giving them back to your corps. I think even as leaders and people who stay and get these people back, like you just got yourself someone who's got some really good training. Mm-hmm. So put them to work, give them responsibility. They're not afraid of it anymore. You know, you have an incredible asset, an incredible leader now at your corps. And I think maybe that doesn't always click right away when for folks that, you know, get them back there, like, hey, give us a testimony. All right, cool. And then that's the last of their experience that you ever, you know, take from it. You know, your church ever benefits from it. Should be more than that, you know.
Right. So I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, Jim, when we had boot camp, when we got kind of flooded out of boot camp. So I remember very specifically on that boot camp, we had bought a whole bunch of Starbucks cards. Mm-hmm. And we sent everybody away from that boot camp with a Starbucks card with a mandate that they had to use that Starbucks card to take their corps officer to coffee and to talk about how they would put into practice some of the things they learned at boot camp.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about is like, okay, they're coming off an amazing experience, camp, RevHi, you know, whatever it is, mission trip. And have a conversation. You said put them to work, but have a conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, what was the thing you learned? What did you see God do? How could we, what do we need to do to make those things happen here? You know, like, what have you learned about yourself? What's your strength? How could you, you know, how could we like leverage this to make our core stronger and to excite the young, you know, your friends or whoever's around. Yeah. I mean, I think the worst thing is that you can just slide back into your old habits. And
I think it's easy to miss that too. Yeah. You know, we get back into our routine, and we forget that follow-up piece, but that follow-up piece is so key. I mean, you've had this leadership development opportunity. Now we got to do something with it, you know?
Right.
I feel like this next question is literally what I just said, but it's most of our audiences are youth leaders and corps officers. How can they help teens and young adults make the most of this life experience change? I mean, we kind of just said that right now, you know.
To me, it's two things. It's what's happening inside of them, and it's also how God wants to use what He's put in them to bless others, because that's what spiritual formation is. It's for God's glory, for sure. It's for my benefit, you know, for my abundant living, and for the blessing of others. So I would have those conversations, you know, and to corps officers and youth leaders who receive these young adults back, you know, have that cup of coffee and that talk, or if it's, you know, whatever it needs to be. Maybe hot chocolate. There you go. Yeah, donuts, right?
Gluten-free donuts.
Have that conversation. You know, what did God do in you, and how is that going to continue? Because I mean, we, you know, talking about social media and meeting your spouse online, why not meet up with those friends that you experienced that with online? That's something that I couldn't do back in the days before y'all were born, right? When I got home from my mission trip.
Mail.
You got mail. Yeah. No, but, you know, there's so many good ways. Like even now, I mean, I have plenty of good Christian friends around me here in LA, but I meet with my sisters in a chat, and I meet with a couple other dear sisters in Christ. I have those groups that keep me accountable to what the Lord's doing in my life and how He's calling me to my neighbor Norm and the people that I want to reach for Jesus. So a well-placed conversation with the youth leader or the corps officer, saying how can we continue that? What plans do you have in place? And then how can we bless others in the corps? I think that's really a really good idea. So.
I think in addition to that, because that's all very, very true, in addition is that the Salvation Army's strength is the variety pack that we offer of ministry, and just not just in programs, but in space. I mean, we're in 112 something countries, and the opportunities are endless. Like if you could go work in the largest AIDS hospital in Africa that's owned by the Salvation Army in Chicken-Kata, we have that kind of stuff. And so I think a lot of times we want to keep our people, but these opportunities are so significant that they can't get anywhere else. Yeah. Like it really, the struggle to do that anywhere else. And it's not that the cool part about the Salvation Army is Lisa pointed out right in the beginning is she did this on her own. It doesn't have to be through Service Corps or go into like another program. If you know an officer somewhere, chances are you could work out a way to get there and do some sort of mission trip on your own. If I know someone in Germany, I could call Germany and say, hey, is there anything I could do, and see if we could work that out. I mean, that's what's so cool about this.
It's almost like you're saying officers appreciate help.
Yeah, well, I think anybody appreciates help.
Yeah.
But more than that, people want to share their culture with other people, and that's a significant thing. And, with Service Corps, really the focus is understanding the Salvation Army culture in that context, and that's what's so significant. And so we have that unique ability that other churches don't have to offer, and it gets, I think, underused.
Right.
And I'm not trying to advocate for a particular program, just advocate for getting kids out and doing stuff. I mean, I worked at camp for 9 summers, and I have zero regrets. But there's a part of me that always wonders, man, I probably could have gone to a couple other camps just to see what it was like. So it's just, we're just uniquely branded that way.
One thing to do too, I think, is also to talk about the possibility of your corps doing a trip. Once you get a certain age and you're paying a mortgage, you might have a couple weeks of vacation you might be able to do. So why not? These young people could be a catalyst for, let's get some of the, the moms and the dads and some others to go as a group, as a corps. Think of how your corps would come together as a team, working fundraising and planning to go and bless another Salvation Army unit on the other side of the world. I know that lots of corps have done it. Yeah. Not enough, I think.
We did it.
You did it?
Yeah. Our corps did it back in the day.
Where did you go?
We went to Mexico. Yeah. Went to Ensenada.
And it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be a flight to... No, but seriously, it doesn't have to be a flight to Africa, which will cost you thousands.
Jumped in a van and back when we still had 15 passengers.
Right.
And just went out there and did a week of ministry and music and VBS stuff. Yeah. And we had people who had gone on mission trips with us. And so it was like, Kyle and I just went to Tijuana a couple months ago just to see what they were doing with the difficulties at the border. And it would be easy to just bring a group over. The Salvation Army has shelters where they people who get deported and sent back, they often get sent back, and they're there in Tijuana and they can't get back to their homes because they have nothing. Yeah. And the Salvation Army, houses them and helps them to make phone calls and get back to their homes. And they're just helping people, and they could use. I mean, that's so close, and we could do that. And so I'd encourage people to just explore those opportunities. Of course, you want to go through all the proper protocols. This is part of my job. I have to say this. You want to check with your divisional leaders before you do anything, and they will set that through. Well, it's great IHQ,
blah, blah, blah.
You can just ask, and somebody will walk you through all that.
Figure it
too.
out. Yeah. People are willing to help. Yes, for sure. People are willing to help you
through all the complicated red tape, whatever. People are willing to help you.
That brings a corps together and starts getting the corps thinking outside of their walls, because that's really the question. What exciting things are happening outside of the walls of your corps? There's a lot happening in, but how are we reaching those who don't know Jesus yet? So
Amen.
All right. Well, Colonel, thank you so much for sitting in with us.
My pleasure. It was great.
It was really good conversation. If you are listening and you have questions, or maybe I don't know, maybe you have an idea of something you want to do, or you just want to get some advice or something, we encourage you to reach out to any of us. You can send us a message on social media at Say Network, or email us at sayconnect@gmail.com. Anything that we've talked about in this episode will be linked in the show notes. And also don't forget to subscribe to the Say Network podcast on iTunes for updates on new episodes. Make sure you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with a brand new episode. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.